So here's a good question. If you had so much leadership that you could spam an infinite stream of knights, spawning them at a constant rate, would they alone be able to advance into and through a high level base and bring the castle gate down? It's a really good question, and to test that, I'm going to go ahead and look at my base. And in order to do that, I'm going to outfit my hero with a full leadership build, as you can see here, actually with the exception of boots, because I don't have a leadership boot currently. But on my crown, my cape, my ring, and my belt, in total, that provides me with about 13,500 leadership, which is a really significantly high number, and actually does give me the ability to, when I'm spawning knights, which only cost 1 morale, to generate a constant stream of knights, never quite getting to the point where my leadership bar is completely depleted. So going in here, you can see that I have knights equipped, and just to review, knights do have a 50% resistance to poison, but other than that, they don't have any weaknesses or any resistance. So nothing special, no bells and whistles on the knight. This is a max level knight at level 8, so 870 hit points, which at max is the lowest number of hit points of any one of the units in Royal Revolt 2, which makes sense because it's the entry level troop that you have access to when you first start out the game. And knights generate 170 normal damage, which is also, even compared to the Froster, which only generates 116, and the Pyromancer, which generates 145 damage. This is the, I would say, point for point. The Knight at max is also the lowest DPS or damage generating unit in the game as well. So everybody's familiar with that. We're all really well acquainted with Knights. And looking at what my Knights are going to be facing off against, I do have a level 5 Snake Tower over here. As we just looked at, Knights do have a 50% resistance to poison, and so this shouldn't be, while this will be difficult for them, it's not going to be something that's impossible to overcome. There's a level 11 Blockade, a level 8 Skull Tower, and then a level 8 Firebolt Tower upgrading to level 9. So this is a really difficult turn to get through for any type of unit or any type of troop. For Knights, it should be especially difficult, but the question is, will an infinite or a constant stream of Knights that's being constantly replenished by a high level of leadership be able to break through and get deeper into the base, or will they be stopped and just continually die off right here at this corner? As you can probably tell, I've tried this before and I already know the answer. You might as well, but it's always fun to look at Knight spam because they only cost 1 morale per unit. So this is kind of the ultimate test and the ultimate face-off of the Knight versus a high-level base. And so let's go ahead and go into the base itself. And what I'll do, I won't be using any spells, I won't be using cannons or pyromancers or anything like that. I will heal my hero in order to prolong the experiment here as long as possible. But I'll do my best not to damage any of these towers as well. Not getting too close, just so we can get a pure idea of how well the Knights do against this setup. Okay, so coming out, I'm just going to come up here and get situated. Okay, so that's a little too close. Here we go, that's probably good enough. And now, here come the Knights. I'm going to back off just a little bit to regenerate some of my own health. As you can see, between the troops that are coming in and the damage that the Snake Tower is generating, not even counting the Firebolt Tower, the Knights are absolutely powerless against the waves and against the towers. They just keep coming and keep dying. So we can go in and try that one more time. Or actually we can just resurrect and keep going. So I'll back off a little bit and you can watch the Knights come out here. Backing off a little too far. So I have quite a few visitors here. Now my knights can't even get anywhere close to the towers. What I'll do is I'll set up a Blade Storm, which is going to clean up all of those guys. Okay, so completely wiped them out, wiped the slate clean. Now here we are, once again. I'll actually come up here just for fun. We'll break those down, and I'll stand right here. Back off just a little bit, regenerate a little bit of health. And here come the knights. They just keep coming. We keep dying. Alright, so let's see how the knights do once we get up here. I'll clear out these troops again with a Blade Storm. Heal. Okay, and so finally, not sure if it was more the Blade Storm or not, but they did take that down. As you can see, without the Skull Tower and now without the Snake Tower, some knights are actually getting into the base. So my choke point here, without the Skull Tower and the Snake Tower, isn't able to fully suppress the knights. But as we get over here, you can see that Skull Tower and that Firebolt Tower aren't letting any of them through whatsoever. Okay. A little bit more just for fun. You can consider this fun. So as you can see here, the combination is just completely preventing any knights from getting through. Again, it was interesting to see there that once the Skull Tower was down and the Snake Tower was down, the Firebolt Tower alone was inadequate to completely prevent the knights from getting through. So that actually speaks to not only the power of the Snake Tower, because the poison damage that the Snake Tower deals out, even though knights have 50% resistance to it, is actually really powerful and is a lot more powerful than a lot of people currently give it credit for. Granted, these are knights, and so they're very easy to kill, but nonetheless, it's kind of past time, and it's a much neglected point. The potency of the Snake Power's poison damage, and then also the Skull Tower. And it's good to recognize and differentiate between the Skull Tower and the Firebolt Tower. And a lot of people have a question on how they should prioritize their upgrades and whether or not they should favor Firebolt Towers over Skull Towers. Most people are significantly favoring Firebolt Towers over Skull Towers, and that's okay. But what you'll notice there is that Firebolt Towers and Skull Towers each kind of have their own specialization, and Skull Towers, while they can be a little bit of an oasis and something that your hero can find a little bit of a reprieve under. By going right underneath them and attacking them, because the blunt damage that they deal out isn't nearly as devastating as the Firebolt Tower's constant rate of fire damage and piercing damage that they deal out. But that's not actually the case for the Skull Tower against your troops and the units that you have coming through. So Skull Towers are really devastating to your oncoming units, whether they be knights or pyromancers or paladins or arblasters or mortars. It's all really the same. They by far generate the most DPS of any tower in the game, and that really shines and really comes out and is particularly useful against troops. So as a defender, if you're trying to ensure that troops aren't able to advance into a base, that's why Skull Towers are actually really useful at choke points. Most people park a Firebolt Tower at a choke point, at that classic choke point where it takes a cannon to bring the tower down, and the hero has to kind of go out and work his way all the way around through the base in order to get back around and attack the tower directly. So most people use a Firebolt Tower there, but I think that if you're doing that, that might be something that you want to experiment with and potentially even look at placing a Skull Tower there, because no hero is going to die in that initial choke point or in one of those first choke points from the damage that a Firebolt Tower deals out. So there's not necessarily any point in having the Firebolt Tower there for the hero or the Skull Tower. What's actually decisive for that first choke point is preventing your troops from, or preventing the oncoming raiders' troops from going through the choke point. And I would actually argue that a high-level Skull Tower is far superior in that instance as compared to a high-level Firebolt Tower. So the Skull Tower, I think, performs much better in the capacity of suppressing the troops and preventing the troops from getting through the choke point and into the base as opposed to the Firebolt Tower. So that actually, this isn't a perfect demonstration of that, but I think that this video is indicative of that point, as well as showing that that knights are are relatively useless when it comes to high-level bases and against a well-designed choke point. So hopefully you guys had some fun with that, and that was demonstrative of not only the power that a high amount of leadership can do, it's also almost as impressive working with archers. And in fact, just to round out the video, we can spam some level 8 archers just to check out how they do. Maybe not quite as fun, but it's worth a shot. So same scenario, I'll just bring my hero up here, and because archers are worth 2, not 1, they don't do nearly as well. And interestingly, the archers don't seem inclined to run out ahead of me. Let's see if that actually works as well. I don't think I've ever noticed that, if that's the case. They're still going. They're trying. They're not nearly as fast as knights, so their rate of movement isn't nearly as good. But as you can see here, from that level 8 Skull Tower, there's a near constant rate, and you can see that the archers actually finally brought down that Snake Tower on their own, and are now facing off against the R-blasters, the mortars. But between them and the Skull Tower, and especially the Skull Tower, as you can see here, it's just completely drilling and obliterating the archers as they attempt to go through there. So same scenario with archers as the knights. It's a different type of damage. It's piercing damage rather than normal damage, which is a little bit better at dealing out range DPS, and they were a lot more effective at bringing down that Snake Tower than the knights were, which were completely powerless to do anything about that. But the Skull Tower was just as effective against the archers, which makes sense because the archers have a very similar number of hit points. So anyway, not really any kind of overarching point to that, but just wanted to demonstrate the effectiveness of the Skull Tower. One final test that we can do here real quickly is instead, and it's not going to so much be spamming because the cost is a lot higher, but instead of that, we can go ahead and try to spam cannons, and I don't have a very high level shield on this account. It's just shield level 4, but we'll go ahead and do cannons. So we'll spam cannons as quickly as we can and do heal and shield on them. And we'll see how quickly the cannons can burn through here. I think the cannons are going to be a lot more successful if they can get up to a point where they are able to take down the Skull Tower. And that's a testament to the blunt damage. Whoops, got an archer in there. So still spamming cannons. They don't come out that quickly, even with 13,500 leadership. And you can see here that between the troops and between the Skull Tower itself, even spamming max level cannons through there, really not capable of making very much headway at all. So that speaks to diversifying the mix of the troops that you're bringing out, and even shows you that with a really high level of leadership, the hero is the one that's completely running the show here. So some interesting takeaways from those experiments. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that. If you have any comments or questions or want me to do some additional experiments along these lines, feel free to let me know on YouTube or out there on Facebook. Thanks.